Hello. In the Crown of Aragon 639 years ago, it was February 21st, 1387. My name is Jonathan Seyfried. I'm a PhD candidate in history at the University of New Mexico, and this is the Historian's Notebook, a podcast about how history gets made. Season 1 is titled Multcara Companiona. We're looking at a document from each day of the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violant de Bar. Let's begin today's document. So on this podcast, we tackle a lot. We make our best attempt at the Latin. We really flex our Catalan vocabulary. We manage cats who jump up on the desk right as we start recording. And so there's a lot happening. And then we're also trying to understand some big mysteries. Like, how was the archive of the Crown of Aragon organized? And also some thematic questions, like how did Joan and Violant relate to each other in a way that might have been unusual, and especially in consideration of gender roles, nonconformist? Or were they actually not that unusual and rather conformist? These are some of the big questions, but there's another one that's been with us all along, and that's the part about the technology that I'm using in order to engage with the history here. And there's a bunch of different technological angles that are happening all at once as I make this podcast. I mean, first of all, I'm recording on digital device and broadcasting out through the podcast distribution network, and just kind of bringing you in to the sound of my voice as I interpret these documents, as opposed to just blogging about it or writing a little newsletter that I can print out and put in an envelope and put a stamp on it. So the very way that I'm communicating this out in this moment is a technological angle. There's also the technological angle of the archive of the Crown of Aragon having been digitized by the Spanish government, and a lot of unnamed labor done by digitizers who went through and took digital images of all of these pages in these registers. And they are available at any time of day on the internet, on a website that is funded and maintained by the government of Spain. So there's a lot of resources just out there that are incredibly useful for this project that were not there just about 20 years ago. Then there's the brand new technological tools. And I'm talking about the AI chatbots. And you've seen me work with ChatGPT primarily. And I'm trying to model how to use those responsibly. And thus far, the chatbots have been a good assist. They've helped me to notice some things that I might not have otherwise noticed. But I don't feel like I've been able to really just hand it over to the chatbot, especially because the paleography is so difficult. Well, there's been a development, and in this process of going through and looking at how the year progressed day by day for Joan and Violant, I'm also simultaneously charting how the technology available for me from the AI, well, I don't know what you want to call it, the AI wave that's hitting, how that is changing throughout the course of this year. And today I'm sharing with you the results of the latest Google Gemini release. I had heard that Gemini 3 was a big deal, but I hadn't really played around with it. There had been a time last year, at the end of the year, when I was really disappointed with Gemini when it came to some of its analysis, and so I've kind of been a little shy to go back to Gemini. But then I was having a conversation in the Amaranth Digital Humanities Studio at the University of New Mexico, my workplace. I'm the studio manager of Amaranth. Check it out. It's a link on my website. If you haven't visited the website for Amaranth, check it out. Well, I was having a conversation there with my dissertation advisor, Fred Gibbs. He said, you know what? Gemini is really strong with the analysis and generation of images. See if it can handle the paleography. And I was skeptical, but holy cow, I am here to report to you all that I cropped today's document from the image of folio 132R in Register 1822. I uploaded it into Gemini, hopefully not in a gross violation of the rules from Pares, but this is a big deal. This is an educational endeavor that, the benefits totally outweigh the detriments in possibly not using this document in a way that is what the folks at Pares would be comfortable with, because it was able to transcribe this document with all of the paleography and the abbreviations with like a 90% or higher accuracy. And it did mess up a couple things, but when I corrected those couple things, it then gave me a transcription that it could then in turn translate from the Latin. And I've tested out some of the phrases, and it looks like it did an accurate job of translating. And I will tell you that I did my due diligence, because I'm currently in a Latin study group, and that's led by Dr. Timothy Graham, one of the premier Latinists, not just at the University of New Mexico, but in the United States. And he leads our group through different documents that we get to choose. And this month, I've been able to submit to the group a document from actually February 28th. The February 28th episode is going to be about the document that the Latin group is working on. And so we transcribed and translated it, and I then tested Gemini, and Google Gemini produced pretty much the same product in terms of transcription and translation that our Latin group did. So to say that this is a breakthrough is an understatement. There's just this gigantic benefit of being able to get to the meaning of these documents so much more quickly. I'm not going to hand over everything to Google Gemini, but for example, in today's document, which I did, as I said before, upload onto Gemini, I have a crystal clear understanding of at least the general topic, and I do not have to worry that I've got the general topic wrong. When it comes to the exact valence of the translation, there's definitely going to be areas where it's just not correct, but in terms of, like, if I spent 2 days on this document, That's how long it would take me to get to where Gemini got, and I would probably not do better because Latin is just so darn challenging, which I've explained about why on this podcast before, so I'm not going to go into that anymore. So this is February, and we're already at this level of technological sophistication with handling the 14th century paleography of the secretarial hand, the cursive, right? It's not even like the kind of paleography that could have been made with a printing press because it's so exact and careful. There's a lot of, in this document, you can see there's wormholes, and there's a lot of places where the scribe was just, ambiguous in the way that the letter was written. And Gemini 3 was able to handle that. It's just really, it's astonishing. And what's going to happen? I said we're in February. Where are we going to be in July? Where are we going to be in October of this year in terms of the power of these tools? So that's something that I'm charting as we go. And it's part of the project because how history gets made is going to change because of AI. The principles behind the choices that we make and the information that we work from, those are not going to change. It's all the same documentary record, and it's all the same sets of tools and interpretive lenses and the expertise of knowing which questions to ask. That all is the same. So AI is not taking over the writing of history unless you want really bad history. But it's assisting those with the expertise in order to get to some stuff more quickly and from a different angle. But you always have to keep in mind that doing it the old way will get you some different results that can be just as interesting. So we shouldn't be talking about wholesale replacement of methods here. Hopefully there will be plenty of people that want to keep using the traditional methods, and we need them in order to help catch when the new methods are making a mistake. So what is this document about? Goodness, we're all the way into this episode, and I haven't even talked about the document. Well, that just happens sometimes. This document is a really great window into interfaith encounter in the 14th century Crown of Aragon. And anybody who's interested in the history of Jews in medieval Iberia should look at this document and look at it in context with some of the foundational work of Yitzhak Bayer, who wrote about the town just a little bit in his 2-volume history of the Jews in Christian Spain, all the way back from the 1950s. He wrote about Alcañiz. Alcañiz is a town about 90 kilometers southeast of Zaragoza. And there is a very significant Jewish community in that town. And it actually produced later on, when we get into the beginning of the 15th century, a figure who was very prominent in the Disputation of Tortosa. And that was an event in which the conversos, those who had converted from Judaism to Christianity, had a debate with Jews who had not converted. And so the process of conversion and the pressure to convert is already something that's going to be starting in the late 14th century. It really picks up after 1391. So we are before that 1391 dividing line. Why is 1391 a dividing line? Because there was a massive wave of anti-Jewish riots. And in 1391. It started in Castile. It quickly spread into the Crown of Aragon, where people just decided we're going to riot and take the property of the Jews, get into violent altercations, murders. It was awful. And the whole explanation of that is one that completely contradicts the convivencia narrative of the history of medieval Spain. And it's not like it marks the end of convivencia, because there was always conflict in the interfaith encounter between Christians, Jews, and Muslims in medieval Spain. There was also always cooperation. It's just a question of what was winning out and why at different times. So the mass movement of the anti-Jewish riots in 1391 is its own separate topic of study from, I would say, a historical sociology point of view. And it's an interesting one. And please read Benjamin Gampel's book. It's just so good. And it's about the royal response. So it's really prominently about Joan and Violant. All right. The town of Alcañiz was also written about more recently by a Spanish historian, Carlos Lalliena Corbera. And I'll put a link to that article in the bibliography on the webpage. There were, according to the documents that Lalliena Corbera analyzed, there were about 300 to 600 people in the Jewish quarter in Alcañiz around 1370. So it was about 60 families. And by the middle of the 1300s, some of the members of that community had become very large bankers, you could say, and money lenders. So there's that stereotype of the Jewish moneylender that is so easy to fall into. Just keep in mind that this was a segment of the population that had gotten involved in lending money to the larger community members around Alcañiz. Doesn't describe the entirety of the Jewish community at all. However, something that does inform what happens in this document is that by the middle of the 1300s, there were many Christian peasants who owed money to Jews in the town of Alcañiz. So that's all work laying that out that's been done by Lalliena Corbera. What do we see in this document here? It's by Violant. The recipient is a certain Berengario Ximeno, who is somehow connected in official capacity to a Petri de Calumada, maybe. I'm not quite sure what the expansion of that abbreviation is in the name that reads as Calada. So I think this letter is to both of them, but maybe not. The official title of Berengario Ximeno is confusing because it looks like it should be lieutenant, like locumtensis, but the letters don't quite add up to that in terms of there's an S in the middle, it seems to me. So this is where Gemini was just not having it. I was like, no, that cannot be locumtensis. But maybe there is some kind of other way of writing out locumtensis. This letter is a cease and desist letter. In fact, the word desistatis appears in line 9. So what's going on is that these officials, who are, it seems, employees officials of the royal family of the Crown of Aragon are doing some kind of unjust seizure of property or fines. Some kind of money is being taken from the Jewish community, and the Jewish community known as the Alihama has written or informed through messenger. I'm not sure how Violant knows, but she uses the word intelleximus. We have learned, we have understood that this is happening and you need to stop. And so this is a direct order to this official to stop carrying out whatever kinds of property seizures or confiscations are going on. So here we have an example of the Alihama appealing directly to the head of the royal family, really, like the queen, saying, we are being mistreated by your officials. Please help us. And Violant is helping. This is a pattern that we see again and again and again. It also crops up during the 1391 anti-Jewish riots, where the royal family is sending people, directing people in order to restrain the injustice that is happening to the Alihamas and individual Jews all throughout the kingdom. There's a financial incentive for this because the tax revenue from the Alihamas was supposed to be going directly to the coffers of the state and did not, and it bypassed the municipality, which is, one of these background reasons for the resentment that was building. So here we again see Violant relating as a royal, like others in the royal family did, relating to the Jewish community as what's been called by them at the time the royal treasure. They referred to the Jews of the land as the royal treasure. So, in fact, there's a whole book by John Boswell called The Royal Treasure about, I think that one might focus on the Muslims actually, but about the religious minorities in the Crown of Aragon and their financial connections to the royal family. So that is today's document, a really good window into interfaith encounter in the 14th century Crown of Aragon. But also methodologically, this one is kind of a turning point in the podcast where I'm going to be going to Gemini to get some transcriptions in the upcoming episodes. And I'll tell you more about that as I evaluate those. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Historian's Notebook, Season 1, Molt Cara Compagnona. If you are leaving with more questions than you arrived with, I have done my job. Remember, the motto of the Historian's Notebook is dissatisfaction guaranteed. Visit the website to see an image of today's document and additional show notes, lots of bibliographic citations, and a copy of the transcript that I got from Google Gemini 3. And listen again tomorrow to hear about the next day in the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. In the meantime, take care.